After years of being tacked onto the end of a menu or being linked with retro liqueur coffees, general restaurant trends of provenance and rapidly improving quality are now increasingly spreading to coffee. Restaurant magazine and Nespresso recently invited a number of chefs and restaurateurs together for a roundtable at Sketch in London to share their top tips on helping restaurants keep pace with the glut of high street coffee shops.
Well, I don't think the explosion of coffee shops in relation to fine dining restaurants is necessarily that relevant. Where it does become relevant, though, is that our customers are exposed to better coffee on a more regular basis and therefore know what is good and bad coffee. Tips I would say is make sure that you source a good coffee and that you learn how to make it and serve it correctly and consistently. Consistency is the key to the entire process.
A lot of restaurants I've been to over the years, not so much now but in years gone by, the most inconsistent part of the offering was the coffee quite often. And we, I think, at stages were guilty of that.
Improving quality through consistency was a key theme, but how can operators do that in the daily grind of running a restaurant? For Heston Blumenthal at the Fat Duck, the team at Casimir in Bristol and many others, that means switching to automated machines such as market leader Nespresso. For others, such as Henry Harris at Racine, it means sticking to a consistent coffee blend such as Illy.
They maintain the machine and will come in as often as necessary. They set the grinders up, they train the staff. And as a result, everyone then knows exactly how that cup of coffee should be. And then I work to make sure that all of my staff know that if a coffee comes up that doesn't look quite right, a coffee that they wouldn't drink themselves, that they give it back and get a fresh one.
The main reason we went for Nespresso was consistency. Obviously we like the blends, we like the coffee that it produces, but the consistency is outstanding, and that really solved a big headache for us. Now, it gives a choice of 5 or 6 different blends, which we feel is enough for our customers, and we rarely get a customer we can't find something for.
With a more knowledgeable diner as likely to ask for a flat white as a filter coffee, one option can be to develop a unique house blend.
Marcus has his own identity in the food. The food represents him, the way we cook it, the way we serve it, the wine we have. All of it is part of his personality. Coffee was one thing that sort of eluded the situation. So when we went to jury and we discussed about having something unique to us, they came up with the idea of perhaps we should have our own blend. We discussed it, we thought about it, and after a lot of testing and a lot of coffee drinking, we came down to this character of coffee, which we think we like, represents us, and so far has been a hit with our guests as well.
After creating a blend of beans from 5 countries, the waiters at Marcus Wareing at the Berkeley are tested for weeks before being let loose on the coffee. Training staff in the craft of coffee or developing sommeliers to have as honed a palate of coffee as they do of wine can be beneficial.
Well, I mean, one thing is obviously visual. Once the crema is gone, we send them back. It's a lot of small things that you really need to do, especially with a machine with handles. And we tell them that, freshly ground, ground to order. Also, if the coffee powder is in here, don't leave it in the machine too long without pressing the water, because it's gonna burn. And that's what you taste afterwards. I mean, even if it looks perfect, the taste might not be perfect. If you try it and it might be burnt or it might not be infused enough.
That whole craft element in a restaurant, from taking raw ingredients in the kitchen and preparing them and cooking and serving them on a plate to a customer, should extend to coffee as well, and coffee should be treated in the same way. And so if you're training someone and they understand how coffee should taste, and if they happen to like it with milk in, and they get the texture of the foam correct and the temperature of the milk correct, they can see that, and it gives them a greater sense of pride in what they do and a greater sense of craft.
In a difficult economic climate, offering different or seasonal varieties of beans or matching coffee with food can be another way of making sure diners stay for a cup at the end of a meal.
As customer demand changes, we will look at more varied and interesting coffees, because there are a lot of things you can do with coffee, obviously. But I think we're going to wait for the customer demand rather than pushing it ourselves.
I think a lot of restaurants at the moment are making a conscious effort to make sure the coffee they're serving is much better. Not only the coffee, the tea as well. When you are talking about restaurants of this kind of caliber, there's always been a petit four, a chocolate, a little biscuit, a madeleine that's served with it. And I think now there's probably a bit more effort going into it to make sure perhaps that that specific chocolate or that specific Madeleine will tie well with the coffee and the tea that serves. Constantly improving the quality of the coffee that we serve and constantly trying to find new ways of trying to incorporate the food together will eventually make it better and better and better.